We are now going to study about menstrual cycle. We have studied about the female reproductive system, and we have seen that how the various parts are present in the abdominal cavity. We even know that it comprises of a pair of reproductive glands called as the ovaries, and that these ovaries release one oocyte every month after the age of puberty is achieved, and this oocyte moves out of the small opening present on the oviduct, and then how the cilia present in the oviduct push the oocyte forward. Now this oocyte reaches the oviduct, and what happens to that oocyte is what we are going to study in this slide. Now the female reproductive system undergoes certain changes at puberty, and those changes are going to repeat at an interval of 28 to 30 days. Now this interval of 28 to 30 days, because one oocyte is released every month, and hence this cycle that we are going to study is going to get repeated after every 28 to 30 days. And these repetitive changes are called as menstrual cycle. This menstrual cycle is a natural process, and it is controlled by 4 hormones. Now these 4 hormones are follicle stimulating hormone, that is FSH, luteinizing hormone, that is LH, and both these are secreted by the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland is an endocrine gland, and it is present in the brain. This pituitary gland secretes follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone under the influence of gonadotropin releasing hormone secreted by hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is a small region in the brain and very close to the pituitary gland. Hypothalamus is very important because it secretes various hormones, and it even controls the body temperature. So once the hypothalamus releases gonadotropin releasing hormone, it is a signal for the pituitary gland to release follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone. So these two are the two main hormones, and the other two hormones are estrogen, which is secreted by follicle, and progesterone, which is secreted by the corpus luteum. We will come across these terms and we will understand them. So we go back to this picture again. We can see certain structures inside the ovary, and these are called as follicles. Now a follicle is a fluid filled sac that contains the immature egg cell or the oocyte, that is female gamete. So one of the follicles, there are a number of follicles, but out of them only one follicle that is there inside the ovary begins to develop, and along with the follicle the oocyte also starts developing, and the development of the oocyte and follicle takes place under the influence of the follicle stimulating hormone secreted by the pituitary gland. So the follicle stimulating hormone secreted by pituitary gland brings about the development of the follicle and the oocyte. Now this developing follicle also secretes another hormone, that is estrogen. It's read here, estrogen secreted by follicle. The follicle also secretes another hormone, estrogen. Now this estrogen secretion is followed by the formation of endometrium, that is a innermost lining of the uterus. So this is the uterus, which is a bag-like structure, muscular structure we had studied, and the innermost lining here of the uterus is called as the endometrium. So this lining of the uterus is formed under the influence of the estrogen hormone secreted by the follicle. Now the follicle has completely developed by now, and this follicle is now going to burst under the influence of the luteinizing hormone, which is another hormone secreted by pituitary gland. releasing the oocyte. This process is called as ovulation. We will come to this diagram now. These are the follicles. These follicles have started developing, but we know that only one follicle develops completely, and you can see the oocyte inside it. Now this follicle has completely grown. This is a completely fully grown follicle, and this is followed by the release of the luteinizing hormone secreted by the pituitary gland, which causes the bursting of the follicle, and the oocyte or the female gamete is going to be released. So the female gamete oocyte is released. So this process of release or bursting of the follicle and the release of the oocyte is called as ovulation. Now after the oocyte is released, the remaining part of the follicle is going to be called as corpus luteum, or it forms the corpus luteum. So here you have the corpus luteum, because the remaining portion of the follicle that is left over after the release of the ovum, it is going to be forming the corpus luteum. This corpus luteum now secretes another hormone which is called as progesterone. Now as soon as the progesterone hormone is secreted by the corpus luteum, it's an indication even for the endometrial glands, the glands that are present on the inner wall of the uterus, that is endometrium. It's a signal for them to even secrete their secretions. So as soon as the corpus luteum secretes progesterone, even the endometrial glands secrete and release their secretions under the influence of the progesterone hormone. Now this completes the process in which the endometrium is now ready for implantation of embryo. Now what is embryo and where is it coming from? So now this process of ovulation is complete. The oocyte is released. We know that the oocyte is going to come out from the opening in the oviduct, and it is going to travel down with the help of the cilia that are going to push it, and the oocyte reaches the oviduct. Now this oocyte remains in the oviduct for 24 hours. If within these 24 hours the oocyte comes across a male gamete, that is sperm cell, there will be fertilization, and the fertilization will result in the formation of a zygote. We know what is fertilization. The fusion of male and female gamete is called as fertilization. So fertilization will take place. It will result in the formation of a diploid zygote, and this zygote undergoes repeated and very fast mitotic divisions, and it gets converted into an embryo. This embryo will be pushed down into the uterus, and now it is ready to be implanted, that is attached to the wall of the uterus for the further development. So this is what is an embryo, and now this embryo will get converted into a young one. But if the oocyte does not encounter a sperm cell, that is male gamete, within 24 hours, in that case the corpus luteum becomes inactive and get converted into corpus albicans. This is followed by the stopping of the secretion of the hormones estrogen and progesterone also. And in absence of estrogen and progesterone, the inner lining of the uterus, which we have called it as the endometrial lining, degenerates. That is, it breaks down. This breaking of the endometrial lining results in the discharge of the unfertilized ovum, along with some bleeding that comes out through the vagina and lasts for about 4 to 5 days. So this breaking down of the endometrial lining and the discharge of the unfertilized ovum through the vagina with bleeding for 4 to 5 days is referred to as menstruation, and this entire cycle that we have studied is the menstrual cycle. So this is what happens, and we have studied the two possibilities, that what happens if the oocyte comes in contact with a male gamete, fertilization occurs, and that results in the implantation of the embryo in the uterus. And the second possibility, that if the oocyte does not encounter a sperm cell within 24 hours, in that case it is going to get discarded out of the body. So this process is referred to as the menstrual cycle.